Let's take this all to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Good to see you. As you heard from Rick, the poll, the vast majority of American people are not happy with President Biden's leadership on a range of topics and issues. So what do you say to the 44% of Americans who say they are worse off now than they were before Biden took office?
Well, look, we all know the economic pressure that Americans have felt when the president took office. The economy was flat on its back. But we're also getting extraordinary results. More than 13 million jobs created. That's more than any presidential term in American history. And yes, it takes a while for people to feel the full benefits of those results, just like it's going to take a while to build all of the infrastructure that we're now underway on with the president's generational infrastructure bill. But he got the bill done after president after president, Congress after Congress couldn't make it happen. He did. We're getting the results on the economy. And one other thing that I think is really important is that the American people agree with us and not with congressional Republicans on what to do about it. So when you look at the economy, the most important thing in the president's view is to support families and support workers, not just with the job creation that's going on, but lowering costs. It's why, for example, lowering the cost of insulin to $35 for seniors is something that the president pushed for, wants to do for all Americans, but congressional Republicans are blocking him. We're going to keep pushing on that because in the end, what we are seeking to do versus prioritizing tax cuts for the wealthy, let alone driving this country toward a government shutdown, is not what the American people want to see in response to these conditions.
Whether they want to or not, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen acknowledged there is a disconnect. You are seeing the disconnect. I have heard this time and time again over the past few months, what President Biden has done, but the message is not getting through. And that message in a re-election campaign is vitally important. So what do you do about that?
Well, of course, I'm here on the official side, not to talk about the campaign side. But one thing I'll tell you, just from an administration perspective, is when we go out on the road, when we demonstrate, for example, how the president's agenda of investing in roads and bridges and railroad improvements and better airports and all the things that we're doing around the country, how that's actually arriving in community after community, you have a whole different kind of conversation. Now, there's a lot more work to do. The story of these investments, these efforts, and these results isn't going to tell itself, but that's exactly the work that we're doing. And we're an administration that isn't all about the polls. We recognize that if we get the results, over time, people will come to appreciate that.
But let's drill down on this again. Gas prices are on the rise again. Gas prices, people look at that. No matter what you say about what you are trying to do, they are feeling it. They are feeling gas prices. They are feeling food prices. It's just not breaking through because they live their lives. They see it every day.
Which is why we're prioritizing making life easier and more affordable for Americans. Again, it's one thing to point to a problem, and frankly, in some quarters well, they're down from their peaks. They're higher than they were a few weeks ago, and the president will continue taking action, not just to make sure that gas prices stay under control, but to make sure that Americans can afford our overall bills. And, when you look at a congressional Republican opposition that is literally against having insulin capped at $35, is against the caps on those out-of-pocket costs, seems more concerned with tax cuts for the wealthy than with actually solving these problems. That's when you see the real difference in approach. So even if you have agreement on an economic challenge, like prices at the grocery store, you have two different ways of dealing with it. Our way of dealing with it is to invest in the supply side that for example, improves the supply chains, which in turn helps bring down those prices. It's to invest in making life more affordable every day for Americans. And the other side's talking about a shutdown. They're talking about government cuts that would, you want to talk about groceries? They're talking about something that would waitlist families that need access to support to be able to afford to feed their children.
You bring up the shutdown. Do you see that as inevitable at this point?
I hope not, because in the event of a shutdown, we would have to immediately stop so many important activities in the Department of Transportation, like training air traffic controllers. After everything we've been through, after all of the disruptions to air traffic, to air travel that we experienced last year, this year, we finally see cancellations and delays back to normal. They're actually a little below where they were before COVID. This would be a reversal that nobody wants, nobody asked for, and I can't believe some of the very same congressional Republicans who get in line to try to beat us up anytime there's a travel disruption, even a weather-related travel disruption, are going to turn around and shut down air traffic control training. And that's just one example from one department that I happen to be very concerned about. So it better not be inevitable.
Secretary, our poll found that more Americans would blame Democrats for a possible shutdown than Republicans. How do you explain that?
I just don't think that's how it's going to actually play out in a Republican shutdown. This is because Republicans on the Hill can't even agree among themselves. And remember, Kevin McCarthy and Speaker McCarthy and President Biden made a deal. And that deal was tough for all sides. Frankly, it was tough for our department. It meant cutting back on some things we wanted to do, some funds we were going to use to improve roads and bridges and airports. But we accepted that because that was the deal that was made earlier this year. And now all we're doing is asking them to live up to that deal. If they can't be organized enough among themselves, if the House Republican Conference is in such chaos that they can't even accept the deal that they supported earlier this year, or in the words of one House Republican, take yes for an answer, then I think Americans are going to see very quickly how we got in that situation. And by the way, not only are they driving us toward a shutdown, but their position, the thing they're trying to use the threat of a shutdown to get, is further cuts that would also undermine things that the American people overwhelmingly want us to do. In the case of transportation, things like railroad safety inspection.
Let's talk a little more about transportation and turn to the auto workers' strike. The UAW extended its strike against GM, Stellantis to 20 different plants. Is that something you support?
We stand with the UAW's determination to make sure that auto workers benefit from the next chapter in the auto industry. As the president has said, when you have record profits in the auto industry, there ought to be record pay and record benefits for the workers who create that value.
President Biden is going to join the picket line on Tuesday. He just announced. We can't find that, talking to historians and labor leaders, that that's ever happened before. Is that a good idea? He's planting his flag with the workers. Obviously, he's a big supporter of unions, but how can he be a mediator of something like that if he's right there with the workers, standing with them?
That's where he stands. He's a pro-worker president. He is an unapologetically pro-union president. And, not just in contrast to the anti-union policies of the Trump administration, but really with respect to presidents of both parties over the last half century. He's proud of the fact that he is the most pro-union and pro-worker among them. And by the way,
so does he support a 40% raise in a 4-day week?
Look, the president, this administration, we are not at the bargaining table, but we are with workers. And by the way,
that sends a pretty strong message.
Yeah, and I will say also the companies, the American auto sector, will benefit in the long run from a deal that moves this country forward and secures American leadership, especially in the next chapter of the automotive industry. Part of what the UAW has made clear is that they're not trying to turn back the clock. They're not saying that they want us back in horse and buggy days. They're not pretending that we can have the technologies of the 60s power us into the 2020s, 30s, and 50s. What they're saying is, if a whole new way of making cars is going to be the way of the world and the way of the automotive sector, then workers ought to be able to benefit from that and thrive on that, just like the last generations of workers did. And there is a win-win future to be had. And that's what the president and the administration are urging the parties to reach.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.